I can.
Can I just share? Precious in the sight of the Lord is the death of his saints. It's my favorite verse. I'm like, death is not death. Death is a new life, getting to go up with your Maker, your God, your Lord.
like
It's the
walking from one room
most
to the
beautiful
next.
thing in the world. It's like birth.
Welcome. This is a really, really special day for Parent Compass because I have a subset of my very own prayer group here. This is a group that has prayed for you. We know what God has done in our hearts and our lives and want that for other people. And I know many of you listening feel the same way. Today we have a very special topic, and that is miracles that have happened when someone is passing from this life to go to heaven to be with Jesus. And how this came about was one of our dear prayer group members, and there's only a few of the group here, but one of our dear prayer group members passed away. And at her celebration of life, we started discussing, and we found out that so many of us have these incredible stories of miracles that have happened at this time. And I know the hospice community, which helps people in this very last time of life, has talked about it, and it's a valid thing. You'll have like a swan song where you might be in a coma, and you come back and see heaven, and you're talking out loud and talking to your family, and then you die soon afterwards. And so they call it a swan song. There's many other things like that, but we are excited to talk about some of these miracles that God has done that help us all to know, yes, He is real, and so is heaven. Thank you for bearing with us. Let's get started. I'm so excited to introduce you to my prayer group. So this is Ellen Grigsby, and she does a fabulous job with her, I'm going to cry, with your wonderful nonprofit, Helping the Persecuted Church.
Cute.
They are in so much pain across the world for their faith, but they're out there, warriors really, for good and spreading the gospel and Bibles around the world. And you support them so wonderfully.
Thank you.
Marvelous. And Nancy Burgher, who, okay, Nancy, I know you might be mad at me, but I'm going to tell the truth. She is one of the most beloved people in all of Dallas-Fort Worth. Amen. Literally. She's done so much and just has a heart of gold and heart of Christ. And that's why people love her so much. She's one of those people that has all her life worked to and surrendered, in a sense, to be like Christ, and we see that in her, and it encourages us in love and to just inspires us to keep going, to help other people too, which you do so well in just your everyday, plus major other things, but even just your everyday communication. We appreciate you so much, Nancy. We love you.
Sweet of you to say.
And Deborah Waters, oh my, we love her so much, and she's our dear prayer group member that we're so grateful for, and just a stellar woman of God.
Thank you.
That we all want to be like. That way you say.
Prayer warrior.
Yes,
an honor to be
and
here.
a prayer warrior, definitely for the kingdom. So today, we're each going to have you tell your stories of miracles that happened. And Ellen, am I allowed to start with you? Are you
You're
willing to
allowed.
be the first guinea pig here?
Okay.
What happened?
Well, okay, my precious brother had died at age 16 of leukemia. I was the oldest. My sister Alice was 4 years younger, and Cliff died when he was 16. And that was really hard on our whole family. We grew up as believers because of our parents' love for Christ, but then we each had personal experiences to know Him as our Savior. But anyway, my dad had died, my beloved dad, who so showed me Jesus, and my mother was about to die, and we knew that. She was in the hospital in ICU, had feeding tubes all in her throat and everything, and was not able to speak, but she was mentally alert. And all she could do was point up to heaven, and that was just her message, to point up to the Lord in those last few days. So most of the family had gotten together and were around her bedside, and my pastor as well. And this was in 2010, December, right after Christmas. And so we all had memories, stories that we told, and sang hymns and prayed over her. And she looked at every one of us. And she had macular degeneration, so she couldn't see real well, but she focused on each one of us around the room, around the bed. And then we left, or they all left, and some of us had been talking, and I was the last one to go in and tell her good night, and we were all going home. And I said, Mama, I'll see you in the morning. But first, I just want to say, Mama, we've all decided that we're not going to do anything that would hasten your going home to the Lord, your death. We're just going to let Him take you when He knows is the right time. And if that's okay, Mama, could you squeeze my hand real tight? And she squeezed it so tight that that's what she wanted. And I said, okay, I love you, I'll see you in the morning. I went home, and by the time I was ready to get in bed, the nurse called me and said, come back, she has really failed. And so I got back my clothes on, and I got down there about 1 or 1:30 in the morning, and she had gone. And so I was led into this room in the ICU, but kind of outside of it. She had been hooked up to everything in the ICU, and I could see her on this bed, twin kind of bed, and she just looked so beautiful, and with no tubes in her or anything. And there was this little lady sitting at the foot of her bed, and she looked kind of like what I would think Mother Teresa looked like, and kind of foreign, and she was just a sweet little lady with a white cap, a white nurse's cap, and a white uniform and white shoes. This is what nurses used to wear when I was a little girl. And she just immediately took my hand and held it so lovingly and warmly. And she just started praising Jesus Christ, who died for Mama and died for us, died for me. And she just couldn't do anything more but praise Him like she loved Him more than anything in the whole universe ever. In heaven and on earth, she just loved Him so much. And she just was praising Him, praying and worshiping Him, totally worshiping Him. And then I was anxious to kind of be by my mom's side, and she said, you go over now and talk to your mother. And so I did, and just had that little sweet time. And then my dear brother-in-law, Don, came in, and we were talking about Mama, and then left, but I realized, oh, that little nurse left, and I didn't see her leave. And later, it dawned on me, and I asked other people where she went. They said, we haven't seen anybody like that. And I even talked to her doctor the next day or sometime, and he said, I don't know anything about a nurse like that. And nobody had seen her. It was 1:30 in the morning. And so I believe, I'm 99% sure she was an angel, because in Hebrews 1, it says, are not angels ministering spirits sent by God to, I can't remember exactly how
encourage
believers? Yeah, encourage those who inherit salvation. And so that's what she did for me in such a huge way. And even though I'm 99% sure she was an angel, I'm not maybe 100% sure, because who am I to say? But it seems that way to me, but I am 100% sure that Jesus died for me and for all of you who believe in him, that it is not by works that we could do, but it is only by the blood that he shed for us, because he was the only one perfect, the Son of God and a man, but the only one whose death could satisfy God's wrath towards sin. And so that is what I'm 100% sure of, that as we put our belief, our total hope for heaven in him, he saves us. And my mom is with him, and my dad and my brother and my brother-in-law, who was in the room that night, who just in July went to be with Jesus too.
That's so beautiful. Were you super sad when your mother died? When you went in there for, that angel, did you need comfort at that time when
totally
your mother
did.
Isn't it just super difficult when your mother passes, even if she's lived a long life?
Yes.
So you really needed
difficult.
It was very sad.
Yeah, and she comforted me, but she took me off guard a little bit and then just pointed me to Jesus. And that's what I needed more than anything. So
Did it fill you up too, where you felt better from being with her?
yes, it did, Natalie, but I didn't really realize it at that point.
Isn't
And
it? That's probably what God does, right?
I mean,
we don't even realize all the good things he's doing, right?
Exactly, and he says, the writer of Hebrews says, be not forgetful to entertain strangers, because you may be entertaining angels unawares.
Yeah.
And so I was not even thinking about that, but now I'm looking for those little ladies in those white caps, white nursing caps.
And also the uniform she was wearing
uniform and the white shoes.
Nobody wore those anymore. Nobody in the hospital had
Yeah.
that. And who is coming at the hospital at 1:30 at night wearing a uniform from eons?
To pray in Jesus' name at a hospital. At a,
At a bedside of someone who, just at this exact time, when you were coming in needing love and support.
That's right, Natalie. Thank you for asking.
Thank you for telling your story, because I know that's going to encourage so many of us.
Good.
So now we get to go to Nancy. Nancy, what's your miracle story?
Well,
I'm sure you have 1,000 million to say, but
we all do, because
Yes.
the
Yes,
Lord
we
is
do.
so faithful.
We all
but
do.
I think the one that you heard me talk about was my mother, and she was not quite 85 years old. She died 6 weeks ahead of her 85th birthday, and she had cancer and was getting more and more weak, and was on hospice, and was past the point of getting out of the bed or anything like that. And so we knew her time was near, and she had wonderful helpers, caregivers at the home. She stayed in the home, and it was late June, early July, and one morning I went over to see her. No, excuse me, the first time, it was at late afternoon. I went by to visit with her before I had to go home and take care of my family. And she said, well, I was sitting in the corner. Her bed, here was the wall, and here was her bed, and here's the corner, and I'm in a chair that just fit in that corner. So she's looking at me, and we're talking. She's very weak. And all of a sudden, her eyes kind of popped open, and even though her head was on her pillow, she kind of jerked back and she said, "Who's that man?" I said, "What?" I thought, well, maybe she's hallucinating. Or I didn't know. And she said, "Who's that man?" And I looked behind just to really pacify her, because I knew there was no room for anyone to be behind my chair, because there was just about 3 inches between the chair and the wall. And I looked back and I said, "Mom, there's no one there." And she said, I said, "Could it be an angel?" And with that, she went, "Yes."
Wow.
And then she kind of relaxed and laid back more. And she said, I said, "Mom, what did he look like? And she just said, beautiful. Well, that was pretty amazing. But a couple of days later, I went, and she said, it was early morning, and I was sitting in that same chair in the corner, and she said, I saw your dad last night. I said, really? And she said, yes, he held my hand, and he said he'd be seeing me soon. Oh. Then another day.
And your dad had already passed away.
Oh, he had passed away 20 more years ago.
Wow.
Yeah.
And which is another miracle. But then the next time I came, she said, Jesus came, and he said he'd be seeing me in a few days.
Wow.
And so this just kept going on. And finally, the Sunday before she died, she had 5 children and 21 grandchildren. So most of us were in her room. She had a fairly large bedroom with sofas and stuff. So we were all in there, and all of a sudden she got excited and said, get out, get out. I said, what? Mother was never rude. She was always so gracious. So this was not like her. And she said, get out, get out.
So all 5 children and all your grandchildren, all her grandchildren?
There were 2 grandchildren that were not there, but they were coming, and they did see her the next day.
So she's kicking everybody out of the room?
Right. In a very soft, barely audible voice, because
She's
her
like,
age
"Get out,
and her
get out."
illness had taken her strength. She said, get out, get out. I said, why, Mother? And she said, there's so many people trying to get in here. So I told my family, I said, all of us go in the living room. So we did, and we waited about 20 minutes. And then I got up and went to the door of her bedroom, and I said, Mom, is it all right to come in? And as I looked at her, she was so relaxed, lying on her pillows with the most, I have to say, it looked like a glory glow on her. Her face, she didn't have any wrinkles anymore. And as I said, she was almost 85. Her face was glowing. And I said, Mom, have they gone? She said, mm-hmm. I said, is it all right to come in? She said, mm-hmm. So I called my brothers and sisters and their children, and we all went back in. And I said, Mom, who all came? And she said, the room was full of angels. Well, each one of us went in one at a time to have a few minutes alone with her, and because we were all her favorites. And so everyone got to speak to her and love on her and tell her how much they loved her, and she got to tell them how much she loved them. And then we left, and the next day, the 2 that were traveling to get there arrived, and they went in and told her their goodbyes. And then when I went in, she said, well, now what I do? She felt like she'd told everyone goodbye, and she was still here. She was waiting to go. The angels had been there. She'd seen Jesus, my dad, and so we all got tickled at that. Well, I saw her on July 3rd that night. It was rather late, about 11. I said, Mom, you know what tomorrow is? And she said, mm-hmm. I said, it's Independence Day. And I knew she was going to be independent from the earth and living with Jesus very soon. And she nodded. And sure enough, we got the call at 6 that morning. And this is what's so sweet. One of her grandchildren, one of the oldest ones, had told the nurse that she would stay with her because the nurse was a little concerned about being alone.
Yeah.
So my niece, Patricia, and the nurse, Barbara, were with Mother, and they both woke up. They couldn't figure out why, but they both were startled and awakened and realized her breathing had a little change. They went and held her hands. They prayed and they sang hymns. And then she raised her hands and said, Mom! And then she breathed her last. Wow. So she was welcomed into heaven by her mother, which we often hear. That is often. And often when they raise their hands, and even as before they're dying, they're trying to get their hands up.
Yeah, they're too weak.
They're too weak. And she was too weak. But at that moment, she had the strength to go, Mom.
Wow.
And so that was just, gave us so much peace and so much joy to celebrate her life, because she had become a Christian back in 1955 and had served the Lord well and was so loving, and she just loved the Lord and served him well. And now I know she's in heaven.
Wow.
Wow.
Such a comfort.
That's amazing. That's amazing. I love it. It's so, like you say, it's just so encouraging to the rest of us.
I know, but we
it's
need
real.
to hear those stories.
real.
And my sister worried because as she was dying, she never saw angels or anything. And I said, Judy, that doesn't mean God loves you less. It's just that we already know that you're going to heaven. We don't have to have that assurance. You know, you don't have to have everybody do it. Just a few to tell us it's going to be great.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's right. I love it.
That's
All right,
beautiful.
Deborah, you're on.
Okay. Wow. So my father, I feel like I need to share first that he did not know the Lord until 4 years ago, until he was 90 years old.
It's a miracle in itself.
It's a miracle in itself. And I knew that he didn't. You know, some people's faith is just very private. But when my mom passed away 15 years ago, I was really mad at the Lord. I was kind of angry because I didn't think my father could live without my mom. And why did you take her first? You know, just being real with the Lord. And I heard these words on the way to the airport. Literally, I'd just gotten the phone call that my mom had passed away. You know, it was a sudden thing. And I heard in this conversation with the Lord, I heard these words from him in my spirit saying, because she knew me, which meant that my father did not know him. So he spared my father's life. My father, he wouldn't take my father before his time, before he was going to be with him. And I had spent 20 years already praying for them, for their faith. My mom was, clearly knew him. But so I just knew at that point that there was going to be time and I didn't know how it was going to happen, but I knew at that point, without a doubt, that my father would get to know Jesus. Didn't know how. COVID happens and the Lord gave me this sweet time with my father to ask my father if he would practice with me as I practice leading a Bible study. And before that, he wouldn't even let me talk about the Bible. I mean, bring it up. Oh, Deborah, it wasn't for people, it was for priests. And so I told him I wanted to start leading a Bible study, and I hope they know you want to lead them in a Bible study. His little grumpy, sweet way. And anyway, so when I told him I needed to practice, we got to spend 4 months of our time just reading the Bible together, and we did a lot of that over the phone. And by the third time, he was weeping over the phone and saying he never knew any of this was in the Bible. He thought he knew the Bible through the book of Common Prayer. He thought that was his Bible. And so he rubbed this Bible raw and would carry it with him everywhere, which was really sweet. But at 92, he was on his way to the hospital for various reasons. And your first thought is to pray for healing. As believers, you want to pray, And I asked the Lord, I'm like, I'm so confused. I don't know how to pray for him because I know that he's, his quality of life isn't the best, but yet he's happy. Like, heal him, make him comfortable. I don't know. And I just heard the Lord say, pray for his end days. And so that's what I started doing. And that was 2 years ago. And
Pray for his end
days. The end of his days, like his end of life stages, because he clearly wasn't at end of life stages at that point. So fast forward, January, he ends up in the hospital with a pretty severe brain bleed from just throwing up. He didn't fall. It was just it was a stomach virus that he was on some blood thinners, and it caused his brain to bleed. So they treated it as a stroke, and he lost his ability to talk for a few days, and he lost most of his function on his left side. And but it didn't slow him down as far as his personality goes. My father's still in the hospital. He was, I think, in the hospital for 21 days. And, they just didn't know what to do with him, and just, placating or pacifying and making him not comfortable with meds, but just, thinking he might die tomorrow because he's not eating and he's not drinking anything. We're like, okay. So they finally decided to send him back to his group home, and we're waiting for the ambulance to come, the transport. And my father's asleep on his bed, and he had lost his movement in his left side, and I'm just sitting there waiting, and all of a sudden I hear this, oh, and I look, and his eyes are wide open, and he's looking all over the room, and his arms are up in the air, and he's just looking around, and it lasted for about a minute, and finally he said, "What are your names?" And plural, many, right? And all of a sudden he went back to sleep. It was like Pinocchio. And I was like, oh my goodness, wow. And so at that point I was quiet. I'm like, what just happened? And then a couple minutes pass, and he wakes up again, and he goes, oh! And he starts wringing his hands, and he's going, oh golly. Oh golly. That was his way of being excited. Oh golly. Oh golly. And then he went back to sleep again. And just another Pinocchio moment. So that the medical transport gets there, and their names sweetly are Jacob and Joshua, and two young men. And I looked at them and I said, okay, well, first of all, my father did wake up, and I asked him, I said, Dad, did you just have a dream? And he goes, yeah, it was a good one. I was like, well, tell me what happened. He goes, oh, I was just playing golf. I'm like, he didn't want to talk about what just happened. So I told the medical transport, Jacob and Joshua, I said, okay, he just had an amazing dream. I'm telling you, he had some sort of vision. Just see if, while y'all are in the ambulance, if he'll open up to you, because he's not open up to me at all. So we get to the home, and Joshua calls me aside. He goes, he said it was an explosion. He said he saw a good explosion. He said it was an explosion, but it was one of those good kinds of explosions. It was really good. And that's all I got. He didn't talk about angels, but he had been talking about seeing neighbors, his mother, his father, and his, in his private time. He'd been telling me that for a while. For a while after that. He lived for another 6 months. And then...
and in that time, after this experience, he started seeing neighbors and things.
Yes, he started talking about
who had passed away.
Yes, yes, his neighbors across the street, and they would always host him